Hey everybody, it's Luke, it's Tennant, it's Frankie, and our special guest,
Hello.
Krista Singleton-Cambage from WWF. It's fantastic to have you with us.
Hello, thank you so much.
You've been here for most of the time I've been here. When did you arrive and when are you leaving?
Yes, we arrived on the 4th of November and I leave tomorrow, so the whole 2-week stretch.
Yeah, right. So you're the perfect person to help us unpack some of the key insights and what you've taken away from COP over the last little while. Maybe if I start with just the general vibe of the event and the balance of negotiations, some of the sessions that are happening with the environment groups and the business groups. There's been a lot going on.
There has indeed been a lot going on. I think the general vibe overall is extremely positive in this space.
Yep.
In the pavilion space where civil society and business in particular have come together, and also at the subnational level, cities, states. The sort of center of gravity in a way seemed at this COP to me to be shifting
Yep.
to the civil society, business, sort of non-state actors space. And the number of initiatives, announcements, sort of steps forward on many different fronts I think has been incredibly positive. And a really great vibe as different pavilions have tried to sort of out-cappuccino each other. And I think really trying to invite others into their space has been really positive development here. And that juxtaposes a little bit to some of what we're seeing at this stage in the formal part of the process.
I think that what you're speaking to is cross-sector collaboration, which reminds me of the jewel in the crown of the Australian Pavilion program, Tennant, the session that I and Krista participated in last week, which is all about how we bring sectors together. We've got good experience of that happening in Australia. How do you feel like the different groupings are working together across those different sectors?
I think in Australia they're working together pretty well, and here at the Conference of the Parties, I don't think they're talking to each other. I think they're mostly ignoring each other and occasionally yelling at each other. So I think if we can bring a bit more of what we're getting right at home, in many countries I think, into this international dialogue, we will be a bit better off. But tricky signs on that this year.
All right, well, the fractiousness, I think that's reflected between the stakeholder groups is also being reflected to some degree amongst the different groupings that are trying to land a communique this weekend. I, for various logistical reasons, left the briefing on this topic earlier. I couldn't get back in. But you guys saw it, right? So what were the key takeouts?
Well, so we had the opportunity to see the heads of delegation from all the parties come together for a conversation about the cover decision. So what's going in the final statement out of COP27? At a high level, lots of people have issues. We had all the representative groups speak first, and if I can, maybe summarise some of the key thematics. The text is way too long. They didn't think it was organised and structured particularly well. And I thought significantly it was good to see Australia step up on behalf of the group that we participated in.
The Umbrella Group.
The Umbrella Group, to make a really strong opening statement on keeping 1.5 degrees alive. And they didn't think that the text that was in there currently was going far enough. And they thought it was potentially representing a step backwards.
This has been a huge issue and a concern, I think, from across environmental groups and business groups that we might be losing some of the momentum for 1.5 that was agreed at Paris. What have you been picking up on that issue, Krista?
I think, again, that's interesting to hear, Frankie, because I think that's really positive momentum, and I think overall it's been great to see business and civil society step up to make sure that they're working with the governments to keep that pressure on. That's something that we've really welcomed as well from the private sector. I think that there was, a few years ago that may not have been the case, and I think that's really positive. So it's great to hear that Australia was leading the charge and sort of keeping that as well. I'm hoping that coming out of Sharm el-Sheikh, that's still intact, and that we're very much focused on keeping that language from Paris. At this stage, I think that's the case, but still a couple of days to go.
Yeah. So what else from the briefing?
Well, look, there was one thing that was abundantly clear out of that briefing, and that is this thing ain't over on Friday.
Yep.
The parties were far apart. They all complained that the pseudo-text was too long, but also that it didn't include a bunch of issues that they wanted in it. And while Bangladesh, for the least developed countries, complained, like they were very clear, our plane bookings are for Saturday. We are out of here on Saturday. We cannot keep going over every time. There's no way they're not going to go over because there's just a gulf on a lot of issues. And we're at this stage of having dot points in a non-paper from the presidency expressing the kind of things put to them by parties rather than an actual text that the presidency thinks will work. We're at that stage much later in the proceedings than would typically be the case.
And that's even given the fact that there's chunks of work that everybody's just agreed, like we're not going to resolve this time. That's been kicked off to COP28, right?
That's right. So there's some things that were already meant to be worked on through that period, including the new collective quantified global goal for finance, the follow-up to the famous / infamous $100 billion per year of climate finance. But there's other things that have been kicked forward, including the development of the very detailed guidance on methodologies for emissions reduction projects and crediting processes under Article 6. So they've got a lot to do next year already, and the more they have to kick forward, the harder next year will be. So it's a race between the difficulties and disagreements of the parties and the things they need to do next year and the plane bookings that they've got or can move to get as much as possible done out of this COP.
The issue that I was really interested to hear about from the different groups was around loss and damage, because it's been so much at the front and center of discussion at this COP, and having it in Africa, a continent full of developing nations, the ones that haven't historically been responsible for the emissions that are out in the atmosphere. It seems like there are sort of still two very distinct streams of thought, in the negotiations. And at this point, it's very late in the game as well, to see AOSIS being really strong about wanting to have agreement on a funding mechanism out of this COP, compared to a much softer commitment potentially around keeping the options open, not meeting those parties. It's going to be interesting to see where that lands, because the presidency in their briefing yesterday said we really want a meaningful commitment out of this COP.
All right, well, we'll be watching that closely over the next couple of days. It sounds like our decision to fly out on Sunday was a pretty good one, Tennant. But Krista, bring us home. You're heading off. What will you take away from COP27? What are your major reflections?
I think overall COP has been a very nuanced outcome. I think there are some really positive developments in relation to Australia's position back on the world stage, but I also think it's a first step, and there's much more to do. I think the pavilion here that the Australian government has put on has been very inclusive and very welcoming, and I think that's again a really positive development and symbolizes Australia's ambition to really be back and to be leading, to be a superpower in many ways, a superpower in terms of renewable energy, a superpower in terms of climate resilience, and hopefully also a superpower in terms of investment in things like loss and damage and phasing out fossil fuels as well. So I think in some ways there's been really positive progress here at COP, and in other ways I think there have been some disappointments. This was supposed to be an implementation COP, and I think we're still not quite there. There are so many elements that we're not ready yet to be on that implementation track, and that's something that we were hoping wasn't going to get kind of kicked down the road again towards COP28, but I think that probably is the case.
Well, there's one area in which the Australian Pavilion isn't being as welcoming, which is that I think they need us to get out of this space, right?
Literally right now.
Literally right now.
Right now.
We're out of here.